Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian M. Hauser. You can find me on all the places, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, at Hawk Blogger, and all your places where you love to get your podcasts, whether it's Spotify, YouTube, actually, or YouTube Music, or Apple Podcasts. All those places, we are there, and we're there with you on this Thursday, this rainy Thursday in the Northwest. It is looking like the rain is going to let up for the game this weekend, which is nice because we will get to see the Seahawks' new weapon on offense, Rashid Shaheed. I actually have to remind myself it is Shaheed because now in my mind, as I was creating the thumbnail for this video, started calling him Shaspeed. And while fitting, it is not his name. So Rashid Shaheed is definitely on my mind, and I think he's going to be on the minds of a lot of defensive coordinators and defensive players for the rest of the year for the Seahawks. We've got a fun show today, and actually it's a double pod Thursday. Who knows? It might be a triple pod Thursday. You never know. But I'm going to start by sharing some sound from yesterday, conversations with Rashid in his first press conference with the Seahawks, as well as Mike Macdonald. And then at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, I'm going to welcome in Ted Nguyen of The Athletic, who is excellent in terms of schematics and breaking things down on both sides of the ball. He was someone who we talked to early about Mike Macdonald and about how he's really revolutionized the way that he teaches his scheme in the NFL. But Ted was one of the guys probably about a month ago that was like, man, it would be ideal if the Seahawks found some way to get Rashid Shaheed. I've got to get it in my head. Rashid Shaheed. That would be amazing if they could get him on this team, and then it happens. And so wanted to bring in Ted to talk about why he felt like that was such a perfect fit for this team. And we will do that here in just a little bit. If you haven't already given the show a like and click subscribe, now is the time to do it. And by the way, I think we are either sold out or almost sold out on our Nashville Live Real Hawk Talk event. So if you have not yet, now would be a good time because they're pretty much almost gone to buy tickets. The link is in the description for the video. If you want to come see us do a live Real Hawk Talk and hang out with the crew in Nashville in a few weeks, that should be fun. All right, I'm going to get into some of the sound in a second. Before I do, let me just warn you all. I don't think it's a cold. I just woke up with, sneezing. And so I'm going to have to mute every once in a while and blow my nose so I don't do it on the air. But appreciate your patience as I do that. So double pod Thursday now, and then 5 o'clock today, we're going to have Nathan Ernst and Dana O'Gorman with us on Real Hawk Talk. And I'm also going to be joining Stacey Rost and Michael Bumpus at 11 o'clock on Sports Radio 710. So if you want to listen in there, you can listen to us have some fun on that one as well. All right. So a bunch of stuff kind of stood out to me in the conversations yesterday, both in the press conferences and in the locker room. If you want to hear the locker room sound, I've actually posted interviews with Tariq Woolen, Derek Hall, Connor O'Toole, Nick Callerup, Ty Okada, and on. Cody White. All that's on patreon.com/hawkblogger. You can get it there. Also, it's just on your normal podcast stuff as well. All right. So I think the biggest thing that was surprising for a number of reasons was what Rashid Shaheed said about at the very, very end of his press conference. It was an innocent question from Bob Condotta about, free agency. It's the end of the year. What are you thinking about, regarding that? Are you just leaving that for the end of the season? Here is what Rashid Shaheed said in response to that question.
Just kind of worry about that later? No, I'm here to stay. I'm here to stay, man. So I'm excited. We can figure something out after the offseason, or after the season ends. But yeah.
Okay, so I'm here to stay. We can figure something out after the offseason, but yeah, I'm here to stay. So Bob followed up just to kind of clarify, is that, you plan to be here long term? And you can hear Bob ask the question in Rashid's answer.
Oh, you're looking at this as your new home?
Long term, yeah. Yes, sir.
Bob said, are you looking at this as your new home? He said, long term, yes, sir. That's surprising on a number of levels, not because, Ernest Jones, when he came here last year, said something similar. And I think in that case, it was pretty obvious that the Seahawks also would want him to be here long term. Sorry, folks. In this situation, I'm not convinced that the Seahawks necessarily are going to fork over the money to keep Rashid Shaheed here long term, but he seems to be of the mind that he wants to be here. The other reason that that's a little surprising is even if that is his intent, his agent generally would not want him to be saying that because, the implication there is that it's taking away some leverage and that the Seahawks might think that they could get him for less money. Who knows? But maybe that's true. Maybe that he is willing to take less money to be here. Don't know. But I thought that was the biggest news of the day yesterday. Now, sure, they can walk it all back and, who knows? But it was pretty clear that was his first response to being here. And, this is a guy that's played in an organization that's just lost and lost and lost. He's coming to an organization that's on the upswing. And there's definitely, this is now potentially a destination where people want to be. That has not been the case for a little while. People wanted to play for Pete Carroll, but not necessarily because they were winning over the last decade. It was because of the environment that he created. The fact that Mike Macdonald and John Schneider have, in a couple of years, turned this into a place where, you've got people that are kind of clamoring to be here. I think that that's good news. And there was a period of time when the Seahawks were the best team in the NFL that players would potentially take less money. They would decline going to other teams and go all the way up here into the corner of the Northwest to play. I think that that's notable. It's just a 6-2 start. Nothing has been determined, but I think you're starting to feel that, one of the benefits of the national conversation and the national attention is players start to hear and players start to recognize what's going on and want to be a part of that. So I thought that was pretty cool from Rashid Shaheed. But that wasn't the only thing he said. He talked about here in New Orleans. This is a good question from Michael Sean Dugar about what he noticed last year about how his work with Chris Olave downfield opened things up for Alvin Kamara underneath. And here is what Rashid said about that.
Yeah, no, being able to stretch the field vertically, it opened up a ton. I feel like that's why we had so much success going on early on in last season. But yeah, just the ability for me and Chris to stretch the field vertically, it opened up so many different things. And yeah, no, that was kind of the name of our game on offense last year. So that's something that we focused on and something that we were able to kind of key point and, just execute it.
So as far as he's concerned, that was a big part of Alvin Kamara's success early last season. And just taking a quick look at what did that success look like last year? If you go back to the first couple of games of the season for Alvin Kamara last year, well, let's just talk about the first couple of games for the Saints. Everyone's talking about, the explosive passing. They rushed for 180 yards in the first game and 190 yards in the second game. So, yeah, it did have an effect on the rushing attack. And in fact, that was, well, it was not the most rushing yards they had in the year. There's a couple other games later in the year where they went for a little bit more. But Alvin Kamara in those games was pretty darn good, as he always is. But in those first two games, Alvin Kamara went for 83 yards on 15 carries and then 115 yards on 20 carries. So, yeah, it was a pretty big deal in terms of how that worked. Now, it's interesting because it wasn't just Rashid Shaheed talking about the implications of how this goes against how this affects defenses. Mike Macdonald also talked about that. And let me pull that up real quick because Brady Henderson kind of talked about, well, does this affect, the loaded boxes that you've been seeing? And Mike I thought his answer there was pretty interesting about the fact that I'll let him answer the question, and then we'll talk about why I think his answer was revealing.
Well, I mean, yes, but I think it's tough to like different teams operate under different like modes of operation and philosophies. We're a shell defense with single high complements. This is kind of how we roll. A lot of teams are single high with split safety complements, and based off of how by situation and people you put on the field, people don't just like I don't see teams just if you are just doing this every week and you're like that, you're probably searching for somewhat of an identity. And the great defenses, have their fastballs and they throw those, and then they have their changeups and curveballs off of it. So I guess what I'm saying is like I think it's a week to week thing, and it's a situation by situation thing. But and look, like you're allowed to throw the ball against shell defense too, and there's a lot of great route concepts that work against shell. So it's just there's good versus all plays. I mean, it's hard to make like general statements that what we're trying to do. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Well, I mean, yes, but I think it's tough to like different teams operate under different like modes of operation and philosophies. We're a shell defense with single high complements. This is kind of how we roll.
My gosh. Thank you, folks. Thank you. Sorry. It's been a rough morning. So a couple things. So what he said there was they are a shell defense with single high complements. That means that they're too high. They're generally going to be in zone. And that's fine. But what he's really talking about is that defenses have principles and rules. And he's also kind of saying, yes, they might be able to get teams to play less stacked boxes. He's also not saying, but also kind of saying that they're exploiting those rules and principles on offense. The fact is that the Seahawks are playing those heavy personnel, the 12, the 21, all those kinds of things. And the reason that they're benefiting from that is that they're able to get all these explosive plays. They don't want that to stop. So they're not getting Rashid Shaheed to make it so that defenses can no longer play 8-man boxes because they're benefiting from those 8-man boxes. At the same time, they also have the ability now to take advantage of it when teams do, or if teams do decide to start playing them differently. So let's keep listening, and I will not have myself on mute, and I don't think I'm gonna have to blow my nose for a little bit.
A lot of teams are single high with split safety complements, and based off of how, by situation and people that you put on the field, people don't just I don't see teams just, if you are just doing this every week and you're like that, you're probably searching for somewhat of an identity. And the great defenses, have their fastballs and they throw those, and then they have their changeups and curveballs off of it. So I guess.
So again, I mean, that's just doubling down on the same point here of you've got a way that you play defense. And if there's a defense that just changes every week, from his perspective, that's not going to be a defense that's playing that well anyway. And the Seahawks are counting on teams to continue to kind of do what they do. And they now have a multitude of options for how they're going to attack you in ways that maybe they didn't before they had Rashid Shaheed.
That's what I'm saying is I think it's a week-to-week thing, and it's a situation-by-situation thing. But and look, you're allowed to throw the ball against shell defense too, and there's a lot of great route concepts that work against shell. So it's just there's good versus all plays. I mean, it's hard to make general statements.
All right, I don't think we need to hear that part again, but I thought that was a pretty enlightening answer from Mike Macdonald, and revealed a little bit about their offensive approach, not just how defenses go about this. Now, I asked Mike early in the press conference about something that I've noticed, and it's something I almost went back and grabbed the sound from. It was before the draft. And I asked Mike Macdonald, you and John talk a lot about who the person is that you're adding to the room. How important, is it possible to really have dogs that you're talking about wanting to get dogs, but are also really good people? And Mike was really eager to answer that question. He's like, I'll take this one. He's like, look at Leonard Williams, look at, he went on down the list of all the guys that are badasses on the football field, but are also great people. And so they've worked so hard to create this culture in the locker room. I asked him how important was, knowing the work they've done to get this culture, how important is the evaluation of the person that you're adding as well as the player? I thought his answer was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's a big part of the conversation. It's a big part of the formula. I think it changes based off of the situation and position groups and things like that. But that's definitely part of our calculus, I guess. But I feel like our guys are really. I mean, talking about just in general here, just whoever we bring in, I feel like our culture is strong. Where our vets will do a great job of bringing them in, and hopefully it's pretty obvious pretty quickly as you walk in here and you're part of our team meetings and how we operate, how we practice, that we have a certain style and way about us that they can be assimilated into.
How much does it change kind of your typical game prep? Yeah, so the fact that he spent that much time talking about it means a lot. And all signs point to Rashid Shaheed not just being a great addition on the field, but being a great addition off the field. I saw Shamar Jean-Charles, who he played with in New Orleans, give him a big hug in the locker room. And guys were already coming up and they were laughing. And I'm sure he'll be shadow boxing by the end of the day and all that kind of stuff. So it's a big deal. It's not easy to create culture. And once you've got it, protecting it's a really big thing. And one thing I learned a long time ago in terms of team building is the first thing that happens when you've got a really strong team culture is it will either accept or reject a new person pretty quickly. Either they are part of that or they are not. I think Rashid's going to fit in just fine. And I think that's a credit to John and Mike for caring about that stuff. I got a couple other sounds from Mike Macdonald I want to play before we get to Ted. Before I do that, I want to make sure you guys have everything you need to be able to get to the game this weekend, next weekend, wherever you want to go. And so we got a great deal from SeatGeek to talk about. Hey, folks, there's never been a better time to go watch the Seahawks play, which is why I want to give the sponsor of today's video, SeatGeek, a huge shout out. With over 35 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. There are more than 70,000 events listed on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, and more. The NFL is in full swing, the NHL is back, and so is the NBA. One of the reasons I love SeatGeek is they've got your back. Each ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, so you know you're getting a good deal. Look for the green dots. Green means good, red, not as good. Plus, every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee. And it's not just about sports. Go see Rush, the Foo Fighters, Doechii, whoever you love. And of course, I've got a code for you guys. You can use code HawkBlogger10 for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with promo code HawkBlogger10. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later. Great deal from SeatGeek. Thanks. Take advantage of the deal. Link is in the description of the video, and you can find it there. I want to talk about a couple other bits that are not Rashid Shaheed related, but I think are pretty important. Asked Coach Macdonald yesterday if they got good news about Ernest Jones from the test that they did on Monday. And here was what the coach said on that matter.
I'm not going to like measure how good the news is. I mean, he's working through it, you know, like he's going to be part of our walkthrough. We'll see how much he does in the actual ACT. So I'm sure it'd be limited to some capacity today, and then we'll see tomorrow. But it's good spirits.
So Ernest Jones, at least at this point, he did participate in what was a ACT practice. That is basically a walkthrough practice yesterday. So it's not proving much, although the fact that he was even going through it a couple days after people were wondering if he was going to go on IR or something along those lines, I think is good news. It qualifies as good news. And then we'll see today whether or not he participates in a real practice. So with that, let's get back to the topic of the day, Rashid Shaheed, and the man that was really pounding the table for this move a couple of weeks ago. Ted Nguyen of The Athletic joins us. Ted, how are you doing on this fine Thursday?
What's going on? I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I feel like ever since Mike Macdonald's come to town, you and I have had so many reasons to connect. And whether it's been talking about Mike or talking about Klint Kubiak or now talking about Rashid Shaheed, what was your reaction when you saw this trade get made?
I mean, I just think it's perfect for what they need. I mean, obviously, there's the scheme fit with him being in the Kubiak offense last year. But, you know, I think they just need another weapon. And I know that's weird to say about a team that has been so explosive. I mean, their explosive pass rate is actually the best explosive pass rate since the 2001 Rams, which is the greatest show on turf. But, I mean, they're doing a bit different. You know, there's a greatest show on turf. They had Isaac Bruce, Tory Horton, Marshall Faulk, and you just couldn't match up with all those weapons. And the Seahawks are obviously a team that, they're creating mismatches through getting big guys on the field and getting single high and creating mismatches with linebackers and that sort of deal. But I think, we've seen explosive offenses like this just run through the regular season. And then when they get in the playoffs, like a good team could kind of scheme them out of these explosives and really tighten things up. So I think getting a player like Shaheed is preparing themselves for the playoffs and preparing themselves for a possibility that a team could go all out trying to stop JSN. And in the playoffs, like, obviously you guys like Horton, you like Elijah Arroyo, but like, is that the weapons that you want to go to in a big spot in the playoffs when the game's on a line? I think getting Shaheed is a legitimate weapon that a guy that's produced in this league and just gives you that other option that you go to when JSN gets doubled.
Yeah, you're talking about that you've seen other teams kind of have positive, explosive regular seasons and then, maybe slow down in the playoffs. Is there a team or two that comes to mind when you say that?
Yeah, I mean, just think, going back and looking at a similar offense like the 2017 Rams, they were extremely explosive. Then you saw them kind of teeter off towards the end of the season. And then in the Super Bowl, they only scored 3 points. So, that's the biggest examples that comes to mind. I'm sure there's other examples that I can't think of off the top of my head right now, but I just think like when you are scheming these guys open and scheming explosives, like, yeah, you can do that in a regular season, and it could happen in the playoffs too. But you always run into the danger of just a team that's really good at matching up with you, and then you don't have a weapon from a Jimmy's and Joe's perspective, because at the end of the day, like you scheme it up all you want, but at the end of the day, you got to have the players to be able to execute.
We'll obviously get back to Rashid Shaheed and what he adds in a second here. But Klint Kubiak, I mean, this is a guy, I think the general consensus I got from talking to and listening to a lot of folks that watch a lot more film than I do was, you know what? He's good. He's kind of like doing the standard, playing the oldies, and he does that well, but there's nothing particularly innovative or unique about what he does. It's kind of like the 2017 Shanahan, offense or something like that. And so the implication was that maybe this was not going to be that dynamic or interesting of an offense. It was just going to be okay. One, is that your impression of Klint Kubiak? And two, if somehow it is, how can he be that doing what everyone else does and have this kind of result?
Well, I think, like you can copy and paste this offense all you want, but at the end of the day, like you need to have the details buttoned up, and you have to have the counters but ready for whatever teams throw at you. And there's some coaches that are out there that could get the playbook and bring the playbook to a different team. But then what do they do when this defense gives them a major adjustment? Do they have that answer? And I think a lot of coaches don't. But Kubiak is a guy that it's not just copying and pasting his offense. His dad ran, it's one of the big innovators of this offense. He's been running it a long time. So he has all those answers. He has all the details buttoned up. So it's not just copy and pasting team. You watch this team, you see all the details in their routes. You see the detail in their timing. And that's the difference. And being able to come up with those counter punches and having those ready and not just trying to grasp at air when when you're seeing something that you're not expecting. I think that's a big difference. And, I think a good example of that is Bobby Slowick. He's a guy that isn't a lifer in this offense. He's a guy that learned it with the Niners, and he went to the Texans, and he initially it looked really good when he wasn't seeing all these counters, but then defenses started adjusting to him, and he just didn't have the answers to adjust to them. So I think it's just different with Kubiak, who really knows his offense. He knows as well as Shanahan and McVay and all those guys.
Yeah, I find that a lot of people, when they talk about offensive coordinators, they talk about scheme. Like they're a scheme genius. There's this new innovative formation they're running, or the way that they're tightening things up or spreading things out or whatever. But I don't know that there's as much conversation about play calling and sequencing and setting people up and doing those counters. And it feels like, to me, that's kind of the harder thing to find than someone who can just roll out a scheme. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think also, like, it's the details within the scheme too. It's how you coach it. It's the timing. It's like the little things, like, oh, how many steps do you take on this route? Like, if you're not coaching that and getting that stuff down, like, you're not going to be able to execute the offense like you want to. And you could tell early on, even in the preseason, the Raiders, I cover the Raiders for a podcast. I do the whole NFL, but I covered the Raiders a little bit more. And then in that preseason week 1, or was it week 2 against the Raiders, you could just see how detailed this offense was.
Well, when you get to looking at this Seahawks team, obviously a lot of people had different expectations about what they were going to see from this team before the season than what they're actually seeing now. I'm curious what your expectations were and what's been maybe different than what you expected.
I definitely did not expect Sam Darnold to look this good, even though I was, I've been like it's funny because I was a Sam Darnold truther for so long, even when he was struggling with the Jets. And then when expectations got too high for him, I was like, okay, let's temper this down a little bit. So I was like all over the place on Sam Darnold. But the biggest thing I was worried about was the state of the Seattle offensive line. Like if you couldn't protect Sam Darnold, he was very sensitive against quick pressures. So I think if you were able to block it long enough, he could kind of navigate the pocket. But quick pressures under 2.5 seconds, he was really sensitive towards that type of pressure. And the Seahawks in the last 3 years before this year led the league in quick pressures. So I was worried about the state of the offensive line. Obviously, getting Zabel in the first round was huge, but also Kubiak, just the way he schemes things up, it's like they just don't put him in straight, or they don't put that line in straight drop back situations that much, or I don't have that rate on me. I remember seeing it; it was very low. So it's part scheme, part upgrading the personnel, and he's it's just all fitting together, and I feel like Darnold's become a better quarterback overall as well.
Yeah, when you see him going from taking over 3 seconds to get rid of the football, one of the slowest in the NFL, to 2.6 and change, and one of the fastest in the NFL, what do you attribute that to?
And part of that is the details and the coaching and the timing and just understanding where this receiver needs to be, trusting where this receiver is going to break and get rid of the ball. There's so many throws on tape where he hits the last step of his drop. He throws the ball. JSN is exactly where he needs to be, and it's just perfect location. And that's just great timing, West Coast type of principles. And it's odd to see that this early on in the process as far as installing the offense and learning this stuff.
So for Klint Kubiak to kind of get into the next tier of offensive coordinators where they are, people are like, yeah, he's the next great OC. What does he have to prove? What does he have to do that he has not yet done?
I think just doing it in the playoffs and coaching against these great defensive minds in the playoffs and maintain, you're probably not going to have the greatest show on turf type of explosive pass rate in the playoffs, but like, how do you adjust in the playoffs? Because typically in the playoffs, you see teams, it's very low scoring in the first half because like you're surprised by the defensive game plan. And then those really great games is when those offensive coordinators can adjust, and then you see kind of a second half explosion. So I want to see that in the playoffs where, a defense comes out, surprises them. Things look really messy. How does he figure things out and put together a plan where they can create in the second half?
If this is just kind of what people have been seeing for a long time, why hasn't somebody through 8 games really been able to either take JSN away or, gum up the works on this offense or take the explosives away? I mean, it's not like you don't have to be a genius to know, okay, the Seahawks are going to go to JSN. The Seahawks are going to try to create explosive. The Seahawks are going to go heavy personnel and they're going to try to play action over the top. Like I know that, they know that. Why haven't people been able to stop it?
Well, one, defense coordinators just do not like to get mismatched as far as putting a lighter body against a bigger body, even though the Seahawks have struggled to run. So I wonder if that does change as the season goes along. Will they start just being like, screw it, like we're not gonna put this linebacker on Elijah Arroyo. We're gonna put a defensive back on there, and if they run on us, they'll run on us. We haven't really seen that yet. So that might be an adjustment that happens later, and we'll see if the Seahawks running game can improve to a point where they can punish those lighter defenses. And also teams have tried to double JSN, like but Darnold's so precise with the ball and he's so precise with his routes. They're beating these double teams. So, but you also don't want to live in a world where you're trying to throw to JSN against double teams too often, which is why it's great to have Shaheed. And I was rewatching that Texans game, and there were times where they were doubling JSN and Horton just couldn't beat like a safety or couldn't beat a corner one-on-one. And that's something he'll probably, I think he's a good receiver, and that's something maybe he could learn to do later down his career. But like Shaheed will destroy a safety if you cover him one-on-one with that. So Yeah, to answer your question, teams are trying to double JSN. They're just so precise right now that they're beating these doubles.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the Texans because I went into that game thinking, okay, number one play action defense in the NFL, excellent edge rush, like to do with 4-man rush generally, and also they do live in nickel. They won't necessarily go heavy. They're fine with Jalen Petrie playing a nickel in either run versus pass. And the Seahawks scored the most points against the Texans of any team. And they had Cooper Kupp throw an interception on that side of the field. And they had a field goal blocked. And they had 4 turnovers. Like, they could have put up 30 plus against that team pretty without even necessarily having their best game. So that's where I'm like, okay, so who like the Rams are probably the team where I'm like, all right, I want to see that matchup. I want to see the DBs that they've got, the pass rush they got, and the mind of Chris Shula going against this. Is that maybe the team? Maybe I guess the Eagles could be another, but are there other teams that stand out to you as that would be a tough matchup?
I think, yeah, I mean, the Rams are better against the run than they were last year, but I mean, to me, the Texans were probably the ultimate team that you would think could stop the Seahawks, and they kind of just ran through them. But it also could be different in the playoffs, or it also helped that the Texans' offense was like is so bad that they're turning the ball over. They're just not a threat, and giving you field position. I think another one might be the Broncos. The Broncos defense, they can play nickel. But they also are a heavy base team against. They actually lead the league in base against heavy personnel too. So and their linebackers can't cover. So that's a weakness you can kind of lean on them against. Who else has a really good defense in the league?
Those are the ones that jump out to me. I think you hit on the big ones. And it's funny you bring up the Broncos. We're talking to Ted Nguyen of The Athletic. And if you had told me before the season that there were going to be 2 teams that had a top 5 pressure rate on defense and a top 5 pressure rate allowed on offense, I would not think the Seahawks would be one of those 2 teams. But somehow here we are. The Broncos are the other team that fits that bill. And, do you think that there's a potential rematch, Super Bowl rematch that could happen down the road if things go well for those 2 teams?
The Broncos have a great defense, an amazing defense, but their offense and Bo Nix right now are struggling. I mean, if they had a slightly better offense, they're probably undefeated at this point. But Bo Nix is having a sophomore slump. He's missing a ton of passes, and it's kind of wiped over by the fact that he had some really good fourth quarters, and they've come back in close 1-score games. But as we know, that's not a sustainable way to play. Bo Nix needs to get better. That defense is amazing, but that offense, it's not Houston Texans bad, but it's average, and they're definitely not playing to their potential.
All right, so talk me through this for a second, Ted. Getting back to Rashid Shaheed, you've got now a situation where Cooper Kupp has, he missed the last game. He actually didn't practice yesterday. Sounds like there's a chance he might miss this game as well. Tory Horton had 2 touchdowns. He's got 6 touchdowns on the year. He's been playing relatively well. Cody White comes in, gets a 60-yard touchdown in his first, game. You mentioned Elijah Arroyo, AJ Barner's been playing well. So how do you, Ted Nguyen, how do you deploy Rashid Shaheed? Does he take over Cooper Kupp snaps? Does he take over Tory Horton snaps? Are you playing 2 receivers, still going 21 or 12 and still having 2 receivers out there? How would you deploy Rashid Shaheed?
Yeah, I think he's definitely taking a large majority of Horton snaps. I think Kupp is still going to have a role because of his ability to pass block. But I think he takes a majority of Horton snaps. He takes some of Cooper Kupp snaps. But I think those 2 guys will still have a role in the offense. Horton will have a much tougher time getting on the field. But yeah, I mean, to me, the great thing about having Shaheed is like he will take some of those deep shots away from JSN, but at the same time, like just him being on the field opens up more space for JSN to work in the intermediate and short areas of the field. So yeah, to me, I just think Horton will probably suffer the most as far as just taking snaps off the field.
Do you think that this move's going to more keep JSN at this nuclear rate that he's at, or is it going to mean that Rashid Shaheed is going to have go on a heater himself the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think there's gonna be maybe one or two less deep shots to JSN per game. But I mean, there's also a possibility that opens up more space for JSN to work underneath and maybe get some more targets in intermediate and short areas of the field. So I don't know exactly how that's going to affect production. So we'll see how that goes. But I don't think it's going to really take JSN off the course that he's on right now.
All right, on the flip sides of the ball, Mike Macdonald and this defense. That was the unit. If you'd asked me before the season, what was the single side of the ball in the NFC West that I had the most confidence was going to be a top 5 unit, I would have told you the Seahawks defense. And it's looking like they're on the way to doing that. Why? What do you think is the key to the way the Seahawks are playing defense right now?
I mean, part of it's just great coaching. I mean, like, yeah, I was very high in the Seahawks defense too, but if you were to tell me that they were going to be missing their entire secondary for, a large part of the season, I would not think that they would be playing as well as they are now. So I think part of it is that's just great coaching and getting everybody on the same page. But I also think just having a great 4-man pass rush really opens up more things for Mike Macdonald, because he never had this in Baltimore where, he could just rush 4 and get pressure. I think DeMarcus Lawrence is one of the best free agent signings of this whole offseason, in my opinion. Like, he looks better than he did in Dallas as a pass rusher, and he's disruptive in the run game. So just adding that to what you already have, then you have Byron Murphy stepping up and playing better in his second season. So yeah, I think just this 4-man pass rush is, probably a lot better than people were going to expect. And I think this is the best 4-man pass rush that Mike Macdonald's ever had as a defensive coach in the league. So it just opens up more things for him.
How do you think about this defense, this Seahawks defense, compared to that last Baltimore defense that Mike Macdonald coached?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, comparing, like, he had the number 1 defense in the NFL his last year in Baltimore. Obviously, there's a lot of different players, different personnel, but very talented. And then you've got the Seahawks defense, who different players, different personnel, but also is very good. Kind of compare and contrast. Where do you see similarities? Where do you see differences?
I think he had Roquan Smith and Kyle Hamilton as his best players with the Ravens. You have Marlon Humphrey there. So you had a really good secondary unit. And as far as defensive line, you have Matabike. So there are some similarities. Like they have those key players in those spots. And now you have Nick Emmanwori that's trying to simulate Kyle Hamilton, and but he's just not. It doesn't make quite the impact there. I just think that the Seahawks have a better 4-man rush, and that's kind of the key to this defense. I think this defense is actually better than the defense that he had in Baltimore.
You mentioned Nick Emmanwori. I've got to say, like, this is a guy that I've been eager to watch, and it's been fun to see him come about. But he's also been a little bit polarizing. Not everybody saw, a high upside for him. A lot of people thought maybe he was not going to hit the ground running in the NFL or work out at all. What have you seen so far from him, and what is he adding to this defense?
To me, I liked his tape in South Carolina, but he was also a player that I thought, he needs to go to. There's maybe like 10 teams he could go to and succeed. And if he goes to a bad environment, he's a guy that could fail, because he had a lot of red flags in his tape as well. Like he, playing from depth, taking bad angles, coverage busts at times, kind of a very streaky tackler. while he's in college. So I thought this is a guy that needs to play nickel when he first started. And I even tweeted that. And, thankfully he went to the right team where Mike Macdonald had the similar vision and put him at nickel right away. I think if you played him at depth or you just put him in a role where, you think that he's going to be a Derwin James right away and trying to move him around all over the place, I think that would have overloaded him. But I just think that he's in a right position. They started off asking him not to do a ton, and then just expanding that as he goes. So he's getting the right coaching. He's playing in the right spots, and they're not asking him to do things that could potentially expose his weaknesses. So that's good coaching there, and he'll get better as he goes along. But there might be a game where he ends up getting exposed. But I think right now he's just in a really good spot.
Yeah, it feels to me like Mike Macdonald has done what good coaches do, and he's kind of been a little bit ahead of a step ahead of where things are going. And offensively, we talked about that Seahawks have done a lot of heavy personnel. It's given them some kind of advantageous looks, what they've exploited in the past game. It's also forced teams to kind of bring their base defense personnel on the field. He drafts a guy like Emmanwori, who he's perfectly happy to stay in nickel and have Emmanwori defend the run or the pass. He also now, with Devin Witherspoon back, we started to see it, just a hint of it in this last game. They'll go to dime. They'll have Tariq Woolen, Emmanwori, Devin Witherspoon, and Josh Jobe all on the field at the same time. Now, Josh Jobe ended up exiting, so that changed it a little bit. And Devin Witherspoon and Emmanwori are two of the best run defending defensive backs you could put out there and can cover. Do you think that they're going to maybe utilize that kind of personnel package against a team like the Rams or some of these other teams that are a lot of 11 personnel?
No, for sure. I think part of the challenge with defending the Rams is that Puka Nacua is basically like a tight end, but you have to treat him like a receiver. But he's so good at blocking that he just destroys the edge that he's on. And if you put a nickel on him, he's just overwhelms that nickel in run blocking. So if you have a defensive back that can cover him, and I mean, you're never really going to cover him well one-on-one, but at least compete with him. And you have a defensive back that can compete with him against a run. That's a huge skeleton key to defending the Rams. And one of the reasons why they're so successful is there just aren't a lot of guys that can do that. So we'll see. It'll be a huge challenge for Emmanwori, or if they decide Witherspoon goes back to nickel in that matchup. It's a huge test.
Where do you put the Seahawks relative to the rest of the NFL right now? Where do they fit? What tier? What do they have left to prove to you?
I mean, to me, they are in tier 1 until it gets disproven, because they have an elite defense. Their offense is scoring more points than anyone right now. So, I mean, when you're looking at what they're doing now, it's hard not to put them in tier 1. I think the reservation is like, is Darnold going to turn to a pumpkin again? He had points in last year where he looked like a top tier quarterback and nobody could stop him. And then later on in the year, somebody found a solution, and then in the playoffs, he teetered out. So I think that's the last thing that he needs to prove. He needs to prove that he can play through really good teams at the end of the year and into the playoffs. But right now, with what they're doing, it's hard not to put them in tier 1.
Where do you see them relative to the Rams?
I think they are actually a more I think the Rams offense is more proven, and as far as Devontae Adams has been good for so long. We see Stafford's a Super Bowl winning quarterback, and obviously Puka is Puka. Sean McVay has that experience, so the numbers are better for the Seahawks right now. I mean, they're better than anybody right now, but I think to me that's just a more proven playoff type of offense. Defensively for the Rams, I think they have a very good defensive line, and Chris Shula is doing stuff with the scheme to kind of hide some of their weaknesses, but they do have weaknesses on that defense from a roster perspective. So to me, it's just the Rams have more experience, and success, proven success in the playoffs.
All right, last thing, Ted. I'm always curious. What's got your attention? You're always following schematically what's going on across the league. Anything kind of on your mind as you're watching this season unfold?
It's kind of interesting how much 6 offensive linemen are getting used now. Yeah, I mean, part of it's because there's a lack of great blocking tight ends, and instead of, if you don't have that great blocking tight end, you might as well just put an offensive lineman in there. And teams are doing some really interesting things with that extra blocker. So that's one thing I'm watching out for. Two, I just think there's just this, and the Seahawks, a part of that is just like this heavy bodies type of running renaissance that's coming into the league because of all the lighter bodies and too high that defenses have gone to. So it's kind of interesting watching that interplay play out during the season, and it's interesting to see how teams are going to defend the Seahawks now that they know they are just getting into these heavy personnel packages to throw the ball over the top.
Yeah, it feels so cyclical. It's one of the things I kind of love about the NFL is everything always comes back around, and teams go to the too high, and now they go to heavy personnel, and who knows, maybe we'll start getting heavier linebackers again, and then we're gonna get back into people exploiting them. It's just on and on and on. Ted, anything people should look out for from you coming up on The Athletic?
Well, I am writing an article about Shaheed right now, so and I'm writing that. I'm teaming up with Michael Dugar about that, so it should be out tomorrow. So look up for that.
Love it. Great stuff. Ted, thank you so much for coming on, and have a great rest of your season.
No problem. You too.
All right. That is Ted Nguyen of The Athletic, one of the brightest minds out there writing about the NFL. Happy to have him back talking to us. I managed to stay off mute the whole time, so that's a win-win, right? You get the pun there? Win-win. Anyway, so good stuff there from Ted. I loved that little factoid about the Seahawks passing offense is the most explosive since the greatest show on turf in 2001. That is amazing. And I should know that, but I didn't. So very, very cool to hear that. And also funny, he's talking about who was on that team with Isaac Bruce and Tory Holt and Marshall Faulk. My comp for Tory Horton was Tory Holt, and not that he is going to be a Hall of Famer the way Tory Holt was, but I even asked Tory Horton about it as like, you've got the same build, you got a lot of the same athletic composite as Tory Holt. Has anyone ever compared you to him? And he said, yeah, actually they have. So anyway, it kind of interesting to hear that, and great stuff from Ted there. I just think one of the things I love about football is the chess match. I mean, I love the ferocity and the gladiator sport of it. Like, that's for sure. The testosterone aspect I love it. At the same time, watching, like, you can be really rough and tough, but if you're not clever and if you're not precise, you're going to have a hard time winning a lot of games consistently. I would say look at the New York Giants, who have Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Abdul Carter and Kayvon Thibodeau, and then watch them play run defense. Watch them even not rush the passer that well week in, week out. Like, you can have overwhelming physical talent and still not be that good if the coaches are not doing their jobs really well. And what I saw with the Rashid Shaheed acquisition for the Seahawks, Mike Macdonald actually talked about it a little bit yesterday. This wasn't a matter of, man, we've got this hole that we've got to fill and we've got this weakness we've got to address. This was kind of a move with an eye down the road of how defenses are probably going to start trying to adjust to what the Seahawks are doing. And the Seahawks basically just, I hesitate to turn it into military terms, but like, it's a little bit of an arms race in that the goal is, okay, we're going to have these things, and just the fact that we have this weaponry may give you some pause about attacking in a certain way, right? Because you know that you're going to have this counter available for the Seahawks. And so now defenses might be thinking, all right, okay, we're going to start doing this. I guarantee you there are some defensive coordinators that just like rolled their eyes, threw their hands in the air when this trade was made, because they're like, well, there goes that plan. So the Seahawks have counters to counters to counters. And so far, the best part of this is nobody's really been able to stop what they've got without Rashid Shaheed. So this just makes them that much more dangerous. And I'll be curious how this plays out in terms of playing time. It is hard for me to fathom that the Seahawks are going to really block the development of Tory Horton, a guy that, honestly, if I look at it right now, I bet, does he lead the team in touchdowns? I think he might. He definitely leads them in receiving touchdowns with 5. And yeah, he's tied with AJ Barner and Zach Charbonnet for the most touchdowns on the team. You're telling me you're going to like bench that guy? Like, come on. I don't know. I'm curious. At the same time, I think Cooper Kupp plays a really important role for this team. I'm not sure you can bench him either. So maybe this means we're going to see more 11 personnel, which would mean more snaps for wide receivers and mean less snaps for a tight end or a fullback. Maybe we'll see less Robbie Oots. Maybe we will see less Nick Callerup or Eric Saubert or whatever that ends up looking like. But yeah, I think it's a fascinating move to watch how this plays out over the rest of this season. All right. So there was one more sound I wanted to play from Mike Macdonald. If you haven't given the show a like and click subscribe, please do. And also join over at patreon.com/hawkblogger. And you can get ad-free audio to this show. You can get access to the Discord server. You get to ask us questions on Real Hawk Talk, which will be at 5 o'clock tonight with Nathan and Dana. And you get verified over at hbtix.com, where you can get Seahawks tickets from Seahawks fans. Also, if you haven't already taken advantage of SimplySeattle.com, discount HawkBlogger15 is the promo code. HawkBlogger15 will get you 15% off the best Seattle sports gear you're going to find. Seahawks, Mariners, Huskies, Sonics, whatever it is. Sonics and Blazers fans can unite in the fact that the Blazers took down the undefeated Oklahoma City Thunder last night. How about those Blazers? Love it. You can also go to jkboots.com/hawkblogger. You got to enter that whole thing into your URL, jkboots.com/hawkblogger. It will give you your own custom promo code, your own special deal on the best boots you're ever going to own. They are rough. They are tough. They are comfortable. They are supportive. These are the things that, workers on, whether you're a construction worker, whether you're a firefighter, these are the boots that those folks wear as they're keeping their feet on their feet all day and making sure that they're safe and durable. So these are the best of the boots, and jkboots.com/hawkblogger gets you the best of the deals on the best of the boots. Go over and download the Sleeper app if you haven't already. They're running a special deal where you get $20 even if you don't make a deposit. Plus, if you use promo code HAWKS, you will get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. All right, let's get Mike Macdonald back out on the stage here. I asked Mike Macdonald about something I'm kind of aware of. They're going through this transition now. They don't necessarily even know it. Mike might not even know it, that they are going from kind of the hunted or the hunter to the hunted. They are getting to the point where they're going to get more national hype and praise. They're going to get more interview requests. They're going to get more distractions in general. It is a change. People can say, it doesn't matter. It matters. It definitely matters. If you don't think these players who know that their careers are short are going to be hearing from their agents about ad deals or sponsorships and, jersey sales and all this other stuff, if you don't think you're going to start seeing different, things change. So I asked him, how do you handle this transition as a team? Here's what he said.
Week to week.
Well, I think just the timing of where we're at in the season going into the second half of the year, And I want our team to understand that we've put ourselves in a position here because of what we do throughout the week and on a day-to-day basis, and our mentality going into game of focusing on how we want to play the best version of football that we can, no matter the circumstance. Again, there's a lot of firsts for our team that for us to go where we want to go are going to have to be first. So like winning on primetime is a first, but you can't say we have to win on primetime. You have to go play your best version of football. We want to win the next game. Ultimately, we want to make the playoffs. We have aspirations to go further than that, and those are all be first for our team. You start getting into the whole like gravitas of the situation, you're going to get lost. So I trust our guys. We're going to be sticking to our process and double down on that. And to me, that's how we win games on a weekly basis, is by nailing that and playing our best football.
Josh is
I think it was really, as you'd expect, a thoughtful answer from Mike Macdonald. I honestly thought there was a chance he was going to kind of be dismissive, like that's not a thing. We're just going to keep doing what we do. He's acknowledging in that answer that actually it is meaningful to get the primetime win and to play like that and to get the attention. And they're going to keep being themselves. They're going to trust in the process. They're going to trust in the guys to make the main thing. And I think so far they've demonstrated that. This has been one of the most consistent teams week in, week out, especially on the defensive side of the ball all year. And I would say now on offense as well, they've been pretty darn consistent week in, week out. Set aside that week one game against the 49ers that was kind of just this big aberration. You can just throw it out at this point. It was not the way the Seahawks offense plays, and they haven't played like that or approached a game like that since. So yeah, I thought that was good to hear from the coach. I do see that we've got some super chats, so let's get to these. Andy Backlund says, Mike is so measured in the press conference. Have you noticed occasionally he can't contain his smile, e.g. the sheriff in the weight room? Yeah, well, that was fun. In the Shaheed press conference, he smiled about the rookie class. Thoughts? That was because he was asked in, I think it was the post game, or maybe it was Monday. Maybe it was Monday press conference about the rookies kind of screaming that it was a rookie takeover during the game on Sunday night. I don't think Mike liked that. He's like, hey, like you got a long way to go. We might have to, he even said we might have to talk about that in the team meeting. And so that's what he was smiling about, is that, he was asked about the rookies and, he clearly had a conversation with those guys about keeping a lid on it and not getting too ahead of themselves. I will say I loved the clip of the Seahawks, defensive players going after the fans in Washington, not in a bad way, but just basically like how much. I think Uchenna asked the guy in the front row, like, how much did you pay for those tickets? I think they were getting heckled and they were talking a lot of trash, and the Seahawks defense just turned around and gave it right back to him. It gave me vibes of, those LOB teams. And I'm not saying they're LOB, but just there's something that comes along with being that good and then proving it, where if you are a competitor, it just kind of comes out of you. So I love seeing that confidence, because generally if that's harnessed in the right way, that can even take you to a higher level. I talked to Derek Hall yesterday. I was like, man, I was really pulling for you on that sack, the couple sacks you could have had. He's like, I know I'm not going to try to chase him, but got close there. It's got to be coming soon. So yeah, I think those guys, it was fun to watch that. All right. Another super chat here from Robert Lehman. Right. Our 4 wide is JSN, Rashid, Horton, and Cup. That's a pretty good for a team that is supposed to have won almost all the games going to for the year, according to the press. Yeah. I think Robert's saying they were expected to win 7.5 games, or that was the over under, and they're already at 6. So yeah, I think it is pretty good for that team. Garth Knight says, Brian, I like this Ted fella. He's got a flexible brain. I don't know what that means, Garth. You always have some unique takes, but I appreciate the super chat. Garth again says, Ted, your thoughts on the Seahawks running game after this trade, and agreed on the DeMarcus Lawrence pickup. Sorry, so I didn't get to this. I generally don't do super chats while I've got a guest. it can kind of interrupt the flow of the conversation, but I do appreciate it. And yeah, we're going to find out together how it's going to affect the flow of the run game in particular. All right. I will be with Stacey Rost and Michael Bumpus here in less than an hour. I got to jet out to the VMAC to be down there with them for that show. So at 11 o'clock, tune in to Seattle Sports for that. I'll be back here this evening, 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific time. We'll be doing Real Hawk Talk with Dana O'Gorman and Nathan Ernst. So be back with us then. We'll have plenty to talk about relative to the injury report from today. Today's the one that I think is going to be most instructive about what's going on. There's also stuff to watch out for on the Cardinals side. Mac Wilson, their starting linebacker, had a rib injury, did not practice yesterday. Max Melton, a starting cornerback, had a concussion. He did not practice yesterday. I saw someone ask Josh Jobe. He did not practice yesterday. I think that's a decent indication he probably won't play, but we'll find out. So all of that is coming up. If you haven't already, give the show a like, click subscribe, please do. 5-star review on Apple Podcast would make my day. And folks, we're in for a good ride. So let's stick in it together, and I'll see you all very soon. Take care.